What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do another episode of Terran School, and today is going to be about 3 racks against Protoss. It's been a build that's known for a long time, it's been used a lot in the last year especially. But recently I found out a new version that I really liked. I saw Kira do it first and decided to copy it and modified it a little bit. And now it's officially all mine. If you guys don't know what 3 racks is about, it's mostly a build where you delay your attack, you get 3 barracks extra fast after expanding. And you're able to do a lot of strong pushes. With the downside that you can't make factory units very early, starport units very early. But since I've been winning so much with this new version recently, I just wanted to show you guys this. This game is actually from last Saturday. I played against Max Pax in the tournament. And I actually beat him 2-0 with doing the same build twice. Which kind of proved to me that the build was very strong. And that my feeling was correct. Now, I'll post the replay in the description as well if you guys want to look at the game a little bit more slowly. But I'm just going to talk about like transitions, you know, how to respond to different things and all that. So the build starts very simple, barracks into gas. The strange thing about this version is that it's going to open with a reactor. And obviously I'll be explaining the thought process and twist later. But the opener is completely standard. You can choose whether to SCV scout or not. It's not a necessity. But I always feel like Protoss, you guys probably can relate to that. They will do a lot of cheeky stuff. Sometimes you'll run into like 5 Protoss in a row who just cheese you. So I just feel a little bit safer with an SCV scout anyway. But if you don't do it, I respect that. Anyway, where this build starts going off the rails a little bit, where it gets different, is that we start with a reactor instead of a Reaper or a Marine. Now, if you don't always want to do this build, what I can actually suggest is that you look at what the probe does. If you play against a Protoss that keeps the probe around here or scouts your main base, then you might want to make a Reaper or Marine instead. But if the probe leaves and doesn't scout if you're making a reactor, you can actually make reactor first always. The reason why I say that is what's really annoying about this is that if you show them that you're making a reactor, the probe can stay here and know your SCV for so long. Like, you're actually going to have to pull like a few more to the low ground to deal with it, which is really annoying. So if you don't want to deal with that, only do it in cases where your opponent actually leaves with the probe. Now, this is where the build gets interesting. You start with 2 Marines, but then you're actually going to make 2 Reapers after. And I like this for a bunch of reasons. First of all, I think it's a fantastic mind game. Especially if your opponent scouts with the probe, sees you're making Marines. Your Reapers can go all the way around the map, get a nice backstab going. And if your opponent thinks they can just send all their units across because there are only Marines, you can actually sometimes kill a lot of probes and get a really big advantage. When it comes to dealing with the first Adept, I actually like to just use my SCV to tank. So I fight with 2 Marines and... here I was actually a bit unlucky, by the way. I fight with 2 Marines and the SCV to kill the Adept, and that's it. Now, other reasons why I really like this build is because even though 2 racks is a generally very strong build, I still feel like it helps a lot to actually get scouting done. Like, knowing whether you play against DTs or Stargate or Blink, it feels really nice to know. And with 2 Reapers, you basically guarantee yourself a scout. It is pretty tough to actually not scout with 2 Reapers. Now, usually, like here, he accidentally saw my Reapers because his Adept was chilling there. But there's a really good chance I would have found an empty probe line. Maybe he would have used a recall. Maybe he would have lost 5 probes. It would have been good for us anyway. And yeah, try to not lose them too easily. Obviously, it's a tool for harassment later on. In this case, I didn't even do the scouting yet. So obviously, I wanted to keep both alive. And back at home, the transition is just the same as any other 3 racks. You get tech labs on these 2 barracks. There's a few different scenarios what you want to do with your barracks is. Most of the time, when you play against a non-Stargate opener, you want to make only Marines until the last set of units before you move out, and then you want to get some Marauders. If you play against Phoenix, you actually just want to make pure Marines. That's the biggest difference. So yeah, it's either having 2 Marauders or only having Marines. And the gas saturation is also very simple. Once again, check out the replay in the description if you want to see it slowly. But basically what you do is you just work with your perfect saturation. If your mineral line is fully saturated, you make the gas and you rally the next 2 SCVs to it. And that's it. Now here I'm going to get a scout with my Reapers. I think based off what you scout, things might get a little bit tricky sometimes. I feel like the hardest opener to possibly play against is Robo first. If you see Robo first a lot in your meta, you might not necessarily want to do 3 racks a lot. If you play against Stargate or Blink or DT Drop, it's all pretty fine. There's no real problem. They do play out a little bit different, however. If you play against Oracle, an adaptation you might want to make is that you actually get an engineering bay a little bit faster, so you can get turrets. Something that happens a lot when you play 3x against Oracle is that they just make extra oracles and fly into your base when you leave. And yeah, you're not going to have a Widowmine or a Viking to deal with it, so you take a lot of damage. If you play against Phoenix, like I said, you don't really need turrets, but you just want to make pure Marine to really be able to burst through. Against Blink, stuff gets a little bit crazy. I like to do move outs like this, where I just kind of dodge the Stalkers. What tends to happen most of the time, if you move through the middle, the Stalkers will find your army, and they will deal a lot of damage to it along the way. And you can actually still push through because you'll have a lot of units. Most likely you'll have Stim at some point as well. But I still feel like if the Protoss micro is very good, it could be difficult. So I like to do moves like this where I just go around. Sometimes I like to wait for them to reach my base so I can go in, knowing that there's no units going to be at home for them. But in general, you want to play it a little bit slow against Blink. If they really are kiting your Marines and stuff, you would just go back. You can wait up a ramp, but don't lose too many units to Stalkers kiting you. At home, the follow-up is pretty strong. The biggest disadvantage with the tech is that you don't get any mine drops. You don't get any liberators, you know, whatever you may want. But you do have a lot of bio units, so once you do get medevacs out, you can actually hit pushes really hard and fast with this build. Now here you can see my strategy in display. Sadly here, MaxPax was playing perfect attention. He had the recall ready, even had a battery ready, so this didn't work out for me too well. But at the same time, his pressure also didn't do any damage at all, and I'm perfectly fine to do whatever I want. Now this game I'm going to go a little bit crazy. Like I said, I like to have my own tactics against Blink. If you guys like this kind of stuff, like to make the game chaotic, you can do stuff like this. I feel like the medium option would just be to wait for medevacs. Anyway, this is what the follow-up looks like. Some more tips for transitions. If you play against Colossus, and just so you guys know how I scouted this, actually I saw the Robo Bay here, but in general, if they have no third base and they have these 4 gassets, it's probably going to be Robo Bay. So just keep that in mind. And what you have to do against Robo Bay from a 3-rax is actually go for tanks. The reason for that is, your tech is late, you still need to make medevacs, which are delayed, and you won't be able to spend any money or time making Vikings. So you just simply have to make tanks to counter the Colossus. Now here, I was waiting for his units to show up at the front. I went in with my run-by, and you can see this was obviously a massive success. And here you can see how fragile the Protoss can still be in these cases, because sometimes it feels like they held my attack, you know, this isn't looking too good. But the Protoss here stayed on 2 bases for a long time. I got 1 run-by in, and the Protoss is instantly down to 30 probes. And this is what I really like about this build. It just gives you a lot of units to play with. The games play out very differently from like those regular 1-1-1s. And yeah, it just creates a bit of chaos sometimes, which is what I like. That's important. So another transition that you could do is if your opponent's playing standard, let's say they go Phoenix with a fast third into charge slots, you would just make mines as usual. I would really recommend to just make tanks when they play late third, heavy gas, you know, like Stalker Colossus kind of composition. But besides that, the game would look pretty much normal. Here I was a little bit scared of a counter pressure. Obviously, when you're ahead, you don't always have to push it that hard. So I was getting a turret in case, you know, he did some desperation DTs. I'm sieging my tanks in case he wanted to blink up into the main. Meanwhile, I'm setting up my drop over here. And from this point on, the game is going to be pretty simple. When you're this ahead, usually you don't want to do anything too crazy, right? Like something that I could consider a mistake here is sending like a 4 medevac drop to the main, risking being caught and losing my units. But here, I'm ahead. I'm going to take it simple. I'm sending a 2 medevac squad to harass. I'm not going to go in right away. I'm just waiting for my time. And you can see, very importantly, I'm consistently making tanks. And trust me, I know it's easy to say, even without the tanks, you'd be in a good spot. But if you don't have that Colossus counter, in either the form of tanks or Vikings, basically, you're going to have a tough time. This game, I have 4 medevacs only. I could have made, you know, 4 Vikings instead of 4 medevacs, but it would make my armor really bad. And these tanks are actually the perfect counter that I need at this point. Now, I would recommend to play it out relatively slow. And the reason I say that is because when you have a low medevac count, which is very common after 3 racks, your army in head-to-head battles, it tends to not be that great. If you don't have a lot of medevac, stims do a lot of damage. A stim does 20 damage on a marauder and 10 HP on a marine. So if you have a big army, you can easily do 500 damage to your army with 1 stim, which is very painful. So if you don't have a lot of high medevac count, I would definitely recommend to take it a little bit slow. You can basically do what I did so far, send out simple drops, simple run-bys, and focus on saturating your third. Here, I forgot my E-banded army for a pretty long time. I'm sure you guys are going to forget yours as well sometimes, but you can also do it better than me. If you do it better than me, then applause for you. And what I actually like to do when I play tank style sometimes, this is just a suggestion, you don't have to do this, but what I like to do is actually add on a second factory sometimes and really go for like a super heavy big tank push with like 10 tanks. Now I feel like today Protoss players are pretty good and they're pretty on point with their run-bys, which is pretty good against tank style. So maybe it's not necessarily the best, but if you do struggle a bit with big fight, not knowing how to beat a big Protoss army, it's worth a shot. If you think making a second factory and going for a ton of tanks is the right play, then that's fantastic. And here, one simple thing that I want to explain to you guys as well is that when you play a siege unit-based composition, this could also be liberators or tanks. The counter for Protoss is usually to just hunt you down in the middle of the map, force you to siege, run away, etc. So what is really good to do is send another squad to another place first, so they have to stay back. And in case of if they don't stay back, you can stim in with this army and kill them. Now Maxwax here, he actually saw my army move out to the left, so he didn't move out with his front units because he knew I had a lot of stuff on the other side. That's why I was able to walk up and siege so easily. It sounds simple, but if you don't do something like that, yeah, it makes a world of difference. Siege units, liberators and tanks, they are simply not that good if you don't actually get to take a position. If you have to fight mid-map, if you have to siege all the time and run away, yeah, it's simply not going to go that well for you. And at home, you can actually see the transition is pretty clean. There's just 2-2 on the way. One thing you could actually do, normally you would make ship weapons from this, right? For the liberators later on. But if you play tank style, you could totally make +1 for the tanks here. That's no biggie at all. Besides that, you want to get a 4th command center. One thing that's really good with Ghost, by the way, with tanks, actually, by the way, is to make Ghost. Because a big counter to tanks are actually Archons. I would say Archon is probably the best unit Protoss has against tanks. Like, not necessarily against Terran, but against tanks, Archons are amazing, and Ghosts, because of that, are a very good complement to the tanks. I think here you're actually going to see it a little bit. I think he has some Archons. And yeah, Archons, they just don't take damage from the tanks. If my tanks shoot them, you can see they take like, 35 damage per shot or something. They survive very long. But at the same time, if I did have a few EMPs, it would go over pretty smoothly. Now this is another quick micro tip here. You see I'm not really winning this fight. It's pretty close. But one thing that's always good to do is... Actually, I'm going to explain you guys a simple rule. If there's many Colossus with little support, you should always grab a few Marauders and stim forward. But sometimes I've seen people use this the wrong way and always stim Marauders forward to go onto the Colossus. You actually cannot do this if there's enough units on the ground. If there's a lot of Zealots, a lot of Archons, maybe even an Immortal, if you stim through their army, your army will take too much damage going to the Colossus. But in a case like this, where there is quote-unquote too many Colossus for the amount of other units they have, you're actually going to see it in action now. You can actually stim past the units to go for the Colossus. Like, you're going to see it here. There's only a few Archons, there's no Zealots, and then you can totally grab your Marauders and target the Colossus down very easily. But once again, only do that when there's not enough ground support. And yeah, I guess that's going to be it for today's video, guys. It's just a very simple 3-rack guide. You're going to win a lot of easy games with this. Let me know how it goes for you guys. Let me know any struggles you guys may have. And thank you guys very much for watching. Have a nice day. Don't forget to sub. And I'll see you guys next time. Adios.